Hey guys, good morning. Happy Friday. I thought I'd jump on a little earlier today as we get the site up and running. I'm looking at a few stories that I want to flag for you that we're not going to include in this first go round on the site. And I just want to make sure that you know about going into the weekend. And then there's two other stories that I think really should be on your radar. So the kids are still sleeping. This is a great time. I thought, let's just get early and get going, right? So here's one of the stories that is still very much developing, and I don't expect to get a lot of information really over the next several hours. We'll see. It really depends upon the Department of Defense. So what we're learning now is that 2 U.S. soldiers have been killed in Afghanistan on some sort of an operation. We don't know the target of the operation yet. We don't know exactly where these soldiers are, and this is very important because the United States government continues to negotiate with the Taliban. The Taliban has been the source of many operations in the past in Afghanistan and now controls more area in Afghanistan than any point in time in America's longest war. So this presents an interesting, it presents an interesting diplomatic challenge. We still have soldiers dying in Afghanistan, clearly sacrificing their life for a mission, where we then have government officials that are potentially negotiating peace with the very people that the soldiers are working against. So again, these soldiers could be engaging the Taliban, could be engaging Al Qaeda. Al Qaeda works with the Taliban, don't forget it. They could be engaging ISIS. We don't really know. But I just want you to know that is the report that we're getting this morning. And we're not going to know anything about the soldiers until the families are notified. And that, of course, is someone's most horrific day. So if you can keep those families in your prayers, I think that would be really great. I think that would be really important. So that's one story I'm going to wait on, and let's get a little bit more information, and then we'll include it in the site. In the meantime, here's another story I want to flag on a Friday. And in general, I've been waiting to mention this to you. Every week, we're getting this sort of momentum up until a Friday with reports that we're going to hear something from the special counsel. The special counsel investigation, of course, is the investigation into Russian collusion, potentially in the 2016 election. But remember that one pager that gave Robert Mueller, the lead prosecutor, his directive was very, very broad. So really the investigation was a huge dragnet. It is a huge dragnet that can catch almost anything up in it, related or unrelated to the US election in 2016. The reason why you hear a lot about it going into Friday is in news, there's something called the Friday document dump. And that means that anyone that wants something out there but doesn't really want the public's attention on it will release it on a Friday night. And the reason is not necessarily because the newsrooms aren't working, because we know newsrooms are 24 hours. It's because of you guys, because they think you're likely not paying as much attention until the following Monday. And at that point, the news cycle could completely change. And so that's why sometimes you get this sort of frenetic reporting. Well, maybe the special counsel report is going to be released, because the thinking is that it would come out on a Friday evening, after closing hours. You guys, we have no idea. We have zero idea when this special report could come out. The special counsel investigation could come out. We have no idea when it comes out what the public is going to see. So I just want to caution you about these headlines. Could it be this Friday? Sure. Could it be 6 months from now on a Friday? Sure. Could it also happen on a Wednesday? Yes. But this is why you start seeing that. And I just want you to realize that that's what's going on. It's not just in DC, it's businesses, it's anybody that just feels like that's still a way to sort of sneak things past the public just a little bit until something else can happen. Okay, so those are two things just to have on your radar. You're going to see these two following stories on our site, but I just want to underscore them today. The historic flooding in the Midwest is such a big story, and it's not just a big story because of these families that are impacted. It's a big story for all of us because this is where the nation's produce and beef is produced. And it's a really big impact, not only for the American farmer who's feeding all of us, but also for the American farmer on the business side who is also being affected by trade wars. The trade war between China and the United States, or even the trade disputes that happen to the North and the South. So I think we should really pay attention to the farming communities, especially in Nebraska, that have been really affected by these floods. And now we're getting a second report by a government agency that says, based on the weather forecasts, it looks like the majority of the United States will be facing flooding through May. They didn't say, they said the lower 48 states. And this echoes what the Nebraska governor actually said in an NPR interview yesterday. I was listening to it last night. He said, we're worried. We're trying to get some recovery done now because we're hearing in the next few weeks there's going to be another weather system that's coming through. What is the weather system that everyone's talking about? Why should, we be worried about flooding in areas where maybe we haven't seen flooding in a long time? It's the early snow melt, and it's higher than expected rain levels in the spring. And that sort of mix looks like it's going to continue at least for the next 6 to 8 weeks. So words to the wise, that's something that can affect all of us, not only just our dinner plates and these farmers and these families that are being impacted, but also any of us that live in areas where there's been maybe past flooding but hasn't been flooding recently. Just a note about forecasts, whether it's the economy or otherwise, whether, predictions become news because they're predictions, but we still have to reserve a little bit back, waiting to know, well, what is actually going to happen. So just like an asterisk on that prediction, I think we should know about that. And then finally, this is a big story that ties into another story that so many of you were interested about just a few weeks ago. So in Mississippi yesterday, they passed one of, if not the most restrictive abortion laws in the nation. A couple months ago in January, New York passed what would be described as the most lenient abortion laws in the entire nation. The Mississippi law would basically not allow abortion after the heartbeat is heard. This will be immediately challenged in court, and probably likely already is. We're going to see it because the Supreme Court in its law about abortion, Roe v. Wade, and just in general, has said that it is up to the state to regulate abortion after viability. So really after the first trimester, but not before. And here's just kind of stepping back from Mississippi. Here's the bigger picture. Some of you have really wanted to know more about what's going on in the country with abortion. This is the great example. You have a highly restrictive law. You have what could be described as a more lenient law in New York, and you have these different states testing the boundaries of abortion. And that's why some are wondering, are we going to see one of these cases make it to the Supreme Court? One of these challenges, either by a more liberal group that's looking for more abortion rights, or what they would call reproductive rights, or a more conservative group that's challenging some of these quote unquote more lenient laws. So this is why this debate continues to happen, because you're seeing these states take very different takes on abortion. So, okay, there's a couple things that I think you need to know. I'm including an article in our newsletter this week. If you haven't signed up for it, definitely do so. This is an article about snowplow parenting that I didn't get to this week, but I thought it was a good read. So I'm going to include that in our newsletter, along with a little summary of the news and tying together what I call a constellation of stories that really haven't been linked. So have a great Friday, you guys. Remember, the news will continue to develop. We'll stay there with you. Don't worry. And have a great weekend, whatever you guys have planned. All right, I'll talk to you later.